Hello and welcome to today's webinar on the topic of use of GRMs in enhancing the delivery of social protection programs. A warm welcome to all of you from across the globe and thank you for choosing to join this today's webinar. As you will have seen, the real objective of today's event is to harvest some lessons of experience from various initiatives from different parts of the world on the topic of grievance redress mechanisms, but also the use of social community scorecards. We're doing this as part of the midterm review of Malawi's National Social Support Program. And as part of the exercise, besides doing the review of the main activities that are being carried out over the last 3 years, is to dive deep on a number of topics. And one of those is indeed on the use of grievance redress mechanisms, which the government of Malawi is currently in the process of upgrading or expanding in the country. To that end, we will be drawing experiences, as I say, from various experiences. And we also look forward to receiving questions later on during the Q&A session from those of you who wish to make comments or address questions to the panelists. This event is being hosted by the government of Malawi in conjunction with the German Technical Cooperation Agency, GIZ, and of course, with the support of the socialprotection.org platform. We have 4 participants for today's event, 4 speakers rather. We have from Ghana, Ms. Nana Ajura, who is working with as a consultant with the Ministry of Gender. We have from Malawi, Mr. Laurent Kansinjiro, who is the Deputy Director in the Ministry of Gender working on the Social Cash Transfer Program. We have Mr. Abid Gulzar, who is a Senior Inclusive Governance Advisor in the Asia-Pacific region for CARE International. And we have Mr. Davies Luhanga, who is a social protection expert working with the World Bank in the Malawi country office. And we will hear more from them in a few minutes. Our program is going to be running for 2 hours. After my short introduction, I'll be handing over to the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development to give a short introduction. And then we will have our 4 presentations. Thereafter, we'll have a short panel discussion where I will ask a number of questions to the panelists. And then we'll turn it over to you as viewers, as listeners, for a Q&A session before final rounding up, which should be just before the 2-hour mark. So on that note, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Ms. Patricia Zimpita, who is the Director for the Poverty Reduction and Social Protection Division in the Malawi Ministry of Economic Planning and Development, to just provide some opening remarks for this webinar. Patricia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tony. Once again, a warm welcome to all participants to this webinar on using GRMs to enhance the delivery of social protection. I would also like to extend a special welcome to all the panelists who will be sharing their experiences in GRM. By way of introduction, with regard to the webinar that we are having this afternoon, I think just to give you a brief background on where we are as Malawi. Malawi has been implementing the Malawi National Social Support Program, which was adopted in 2018. The Malawi National Social Support Program, in short, called the MNSSP. It provides a guiding framework for the design, implementation, coordination, as well as monitoring and evaluation of social protection programs. The MNSSP was developed through a consultative process involving different stakeholders, including government institutions, development partners, civil society, the NGOs. So there are a number of programs that are being implemented under this MNSSP II program. And they include the social cash transfer program, which targets the ultra poor with unconditional cash transfers. We have the enhanced public works program. This one targets those who have labor, the poor with labor, and they are paid for the work they do. We also have the school meals program, and this one is being done in schools, providing meals to school-going children, and the unified beneficiary registry, which is the social registry that contains household characteristics, and it's used not only for social protection programs, but also for other social activities in the country. So with regard to the Malawi National Social Support Program, we are currently almost halfway through with the implementation of the program. And at the moment, we are undertaking a midterm review of the program with support from the German government through the GIZ. So the Grievance and Redress Mechanism is one of the major components which is being implemented under the MNSSP II program. GRMs in social protection are recognized as critical tools for promoting transparency and accountability. I think we all agree that program beneficiaries have a right to lodge a complaint where the need is and receive feedback during implementation of social protection programs. This helps to ensure that the programs we are delivering are being done, the programs are delivering on their mandate, as well as that we are able to solve problems before they escalate, among other things. In this regard, in 2020, we developed a GRM handbook for social protection programs under the Malawi National Social Support Program. The handbook serves as a guide to program implementers on resolving complaints among beneficiaries. As we are undertaking the midterm review of the MNSSP II, we also want to explore new ways on how we can improve on the existing GRM for the Malawi National Social Support Program. The webinar today is therefore aimed at providing a platform for social protection experts to share on their experiences in GRMs as well as in social accountability. We all have different experiences on GRMs for social protection that we are undertaking at the moment, and we can therefore all learn from each other. Yes, we all have been implementing GRMs for social protection, but I believe there are still areas that may require improvement to ensure effective and efficient delivery of our social protection programs. Therefore, in this webinar, we would be hearing from the various panelists on their various experiences and how GRMs are shaping the design and implementation of social protection programs in various countries. The lessons and experiences from this forum will definitely provide useful information that will inform our respective and various GRM activities. And for us here in Malawi, the information will feed into the midterm review process of the MNSSP II that is ongoing. And it will also provide insights on how we can shape GRM for social protection during the remaining part of implementation of the MNSSP II. Today's discussion should eventually enhance our understanding on the key issues on the design, characteristics, and implementation of GRMs for social protection. So I would like to urge each one of us to be a part of this conversation on using GRMs to enhance the delivery of social protection programs. Otherwise, I wish you all fruitful discussions, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Patricia, for setting the context and orienting all of us towards the objectives of the event and how this can contribute also to Malawi's efforts to enhance the delivery of social protection in the country. I think at this stage, what we will do is to move on with our presentations. But just before introducing the first speaker, let me just introduce myself, which I forgot to do. I'm your moderator, as you probably have realized for this event today. My name is Tony Land. I'm actually based in Botswana, but have recently been in Malawi as part of the midterm review process. I'm the team leader for the midterm review, working with colleagues, 3 other colleagues. And so this is a very useful also for the team to have this opportunity of getting insights and exchanges on the issue of GRM. Okay, at this moment, let me now take the opportunity of inviting Nana Ajura from Ghana. And she can also perhaps say a few words about herself, but she is working on the Helpline of Hope, which is a single window grievance and redress mechanism. And she's going to tell us more about how this works. So over to you, Nana.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you so much, Anthony. Just as you rightly said, my name is Nana Ajura Twum-Danso. I'm a consultant with the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection, precisely the Helpline of Hope, our single window citizen engagement service. So as you can see on the slide, you can see our call center. That is the initial setup of the call center when we started initially. Can you please move the slide? Next slide, please. Okay, so we are going to look at the introduction, how many programs it serves, the referral process to the individual programs, the cost sharing, and the coordination among the programs. Kindly move to the next slide. Now, with the Ghana's Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection, as part of its efforts to strengthen and improve coordination among the social protection program, it operationalized our single window citizen engagement service, as we termed it SWERS. Now, the primary objective is to improve transparency and accountability of the system by creating a unified complaints and grievance redress mechanism for all social protection programs. Next slide, please. Now, the integrated complaints handling service, during our launch of the single window, the SWERS, we christened it Helpline of Hope call center to reinforce the primary objective of the single window, plus to provide services to Ghanaians, especially with the social protection programs. Now, the Helpline of Hope currently has 12 call center operators. This excludes the 2 consultants. We have 4 permanent staff who are civil servants, and then we have 8 national service personnel who are supporting the 2 permanent staff. Kindly move on. Now, this program, as I said before, as we started, it was based on only our social protection programs, the flagship programs. We have the LEAP, Labor Intensive Public Works. We have the Ghana School Feeding Program. We have the National Health Insurance Scheme. We have the LIPW, Labor Intensive Public Works. We have the Education Capitation Grants, and then the Ghana National Household Registry. However, even though our main focus was on the social protection program, we realized that we're getting other grievances, social grievances, which are being handled by the Ministry of Gender, Ghana. Now, issues on gender-based violence. We also had issues on anti-human trafficking, child labor, child abandonment, child neglect, and all that. We had issues with Disability Common Fund, financial services, and the others. The others are a whole lot of category, marital, psychological issues, and the rest. Kindly move on. Next slide, please. Now, what we did was, as we set up the call center, we realized that we needed to have a web-based system which will allow all the other programs to be able to have access to be easier for complainants once they send their requests, it will be easier for tracking cases, and then we'll be able to resolve issues faster. So the single window citizen engagement service Ghana had designed a web system known as a unified case management system. So this is how the interface looks like. Once you call, the call agents key in your information, and then it moves to another level. Kindly move on to the next slide. So this is how it works. Now, once you call us, once the call agent inputs the information on the system, the senior case management officer picks up the information and then assigns to the appropriate social protection program case management officer who is responsible for the case. So once they receive the case via email. They'll get a prompt via email, a message on their cell phone to notify them of a new message. So they'll go into the single window system and then we'll address the system, the case as it is, the complainant, all that actions that have been made will be inputted on the single window system. So we can even see it at our end. Once the complaint is resolved, we inform the complainant back to find out how satisfied the complainant is. If the complainant is satisfied, then the case is closed. And then we close the case. Once the complainant is not satisfied, we reopen the case and then an appeal process goes through. So it goes through that process. So that's how our process is. Kindly move on to the next slide. Now, looking at our system, when we started, these are the category of type of calls that we receive at our end. We receive cases. That's what I explained earlier. We have feedback calls, complainants who call back to appreciate the SWERs or appreciate the programs for their issues being resolved. Then, of course, we have the silent and prank calls and then follow-up calls. Now, the silent or prank calls, we receive about 30% of our calls are silent and prank calls. You know, people call to test the system, whether really the system is working. They call making all fans and all jokes and all that. So we've diverse systems and mediums to curb all these things. And I think now the silent and prank calls have reduced to about 15%. Now, looking at my slide, we see that frequency of calls received. Ghana has 16 regions, and in all our 16 regions, we receive most of our calls from the urban. That's our capital. That's 70% of our calls are received from complainants in the capital. We have some in Ashanti region. We have 40% in Ashanti region, 25% in Central and all that. Now, with cases where we have few calls received, complainants calls received in those regions, we've started our sensitization program whereby we are sensitizing most of the populace to be aware that there's a single window where they can channel their grievances. Now, these are the topics that we have. Once you call, these are the category of cases that we've received currently. We have targeting, that's the LEAP household selection. We have enrollment with LEAP. We have payment issues, quality of service, abuse cases, trafficking, legal issues, appraisal and site selection that has to do with LIPW, work-related, post-completion and safeguard-related, closure concerns, enquiries, the general enquiries that we receive, the enumeration that has to do with those who do the household registry enumeration, the census. We had Ghana 4 months ago had a population census exercise, so people had issues. They called our helpline. We have people extorting money from beneficiaries during payment, that is LEAP. We had our COVID support and the rest. Kindly move on to the next slide. Now, SWERS coordinates with the social protection in terms of resolution of cases through our case management process mentioned above. However, each program is responsible for its own costs in terms of resolution of the complaint. Now, in regards to non-social protection programs like rape, abuse, and the like, there's usually cost sharing and coordination of both government and non-governmental organizations. Resolution of these complaints. Can you move on to the next slide? Now, a special case it's of coordination and cost sharing is through a rescue of a 14-year-old girl from child marriage. The young lady has been placed into one of our shelter for abused children, and the coordination and cost sharing was being shared by both government NGOs. We appealed to some private individuals to assist. And currently the young lady is being enrolled in a vocational training institute where she's studying dressmaking. Kindly move on to the next slide. Now, the Helpline of Hope, since the establishment of its establishment, has served as the voice for the voiceless. Now, it is receiving positive results from all the population and to all those who seek, who have no other sources of seeking redress. We have citizens calling, yes, we're starting to call in the Helpline of Hope for their issues to be redressed. Thank you.
Nana, thank you very much indeed for a very comprehensive and concise presentation. Moreover, you did it within the time, so that's always gratifying for the moderator to see participants sticking to time. That was very helpful. There are many, many issues which I'm sure will generate a host of questions. As you know, what we're going to do is give an opportunity for the audience to ask questions later on. And you know, I also have a question in store for you. But at this stage, what we're going to do is move on to the next presenter. And the next presenter will be Laurent. And that's Laurent Cancingiero from the Ministry of Gender Social Cash Transfer Program, where he is Deputy Director. And he's going to be talking to us about the experience of the Kuchi call center. Laurent, over to you.
Thank you. I'll be talking about the experience of the Kuchi call center. Kuchi stands for COVID-19 Cash Transfer Intervention Call Center. It is basically a call center that was established with the advent of COVID-19 to address grievances arising from an intervention we are doing in the urban cities. Next slide. Okay, so I'll take you through what is Kuchi, objectives of the call center, achievements of the call center, challenges faced when operating the call center, lessons to learn from the Kuchi call center. So, as I pointed out, the Kuchi stands for COVID-19 Urban Cash Transfer Intervention, which was a government of Malawi program supported by the German government, the European Union, the World Bank, the UN family, and it was providing cash assistance to vulnerable households in the hotspots of the cities of Lilongwe, Blantyre, Zuzu, and Zomba. These are the 4 cities that we have in Malawi. The program's main objective was to provide monthly cash transfers of 35,000 kwacha to the poor and vulnerable in response to this socioeconomic crisis caused by COVID-19. Basically, the call center served to assist, aimed at assisting beneficiaries and non-beneficiaries alike in inquiring general information about the program. Also, it aimed at addressing claims and the grievances faced by beneficiaries and providing, serving as a vehicle for providing information about payment to beneficiaries and about the household status of beneficiaries and non-beneficiaries via SMS. So what were we able to achieve with the call center? The call center was able to satisfy beneficiaries and non-beneficiaries by providing quick responses. And in a timely manner. It also to provide feedback to beneficiaries about the program execution and criteria And of course, it managed to resolve issues for those with the missing phone numbers in our management information system. And of course, delegating the beneficiaries and the beneficiaries to the right channels on issues that do not concern the program. And of course, it was also one of the mechanisms for addressing or preventing and resolution of fraud cases. Next. Okay, so, and some of our experiences in terms of challenges that we were encountering with the call center included one issue had to do with the furious beneficiaries who could be calling and inserting the call center operators. But also in some cases, this, because it was running on a money program, non-beneficiaries not understanding the status of their household, whether they had been picked or they had challenges, especially for those that had not been picked, and yet they were anticipating something after being registered. They could go, they could not really understand what was happening to them when possibly some of their neighbors have received money. There was also an issue of network problems whereby the Kuchi MIS, whereby at some point, because of flow of traffic in the system, in our management information system, it would slow down. In some cases, I think the challenges that we are facing included the issues with phone calls that could not go through the toll-free line, and in some cases, claims not being addressed on time, causing the beneficiary to keep on contacting the call center. Yes, so the challenges continue. But also we had issues to do with beneficiaries claiming to have been interviewed. Yet when you check the code that they were providing, their data could not be found in the management information system of the code. But also in some cases, beneficiaries would deliberately would change their phone numbers and claim that they had not received the cash, when in reality they had received the cash. So we're trying to check that by cross-checking with the UPL, what we call the unique code that we are being given during registration, as well as with their national ID code. There was also in some cases issues of duplicated households, whereby 2 or more households would be found under one program code, or UPR code. UPR code is a unified beneficiary registry system based on which we registered the beneficiaries under the COVID-19 urban cash intervention. Yeah, so key quick lessons that we can learn is that as the call center, as it stands for us, it acts really as a bridge for the beneficiaries and the program, and it made it easy for our beneficiaries to access information about the program, and of course in terms of also made it easy to resolve some of the problems faced by beneficiaries. The call center also helps to follow up on the on addressed claims and grievances, as well as it has served as a mechanism for a mechanism for maintaining follow-ups of calls made in regard to the program. Next. Yeah, so in in the conclusion, I can say the call center really acts as a link between the beneficiaries and the program in providing quality information, especially in a context where you cannot frequently visit the beneficiaries for the reason that we are living in a COVID-19 situation. There was just for appreciation, I think a slide that had to do with some of the cases and nature of the cases that were received by the call center that I wanted to show. I don't know, moderator, if that opportunity can be availed after this.
Hello, Laurent. I think we received that slide from you, but for some reason it hasn't made it to the screen here. So that must be.
Yes.
So we apologize for that. I don't know whether you can quickly...
That's what I'm, yes, that's what I'm wondering, because it's really, it doesn't have those.
So, shame on us. Apologies. Not quite sure what happened, but are you able to speak to any of those? Can you just give maybe a couple of, I don't know if that's putting you on the spot, but if you're able to just maybe refer to any of those statistics, is there anything you have at hand there? If not, well, we'll make up another time. I'm sure with the information that's shared to participants after the event, we can ensure that that slide is there.
Oh, all right, maybe because I would have to, I think, to go through again my laptop, but at some appropriate time, maybe if you can just go back to the revised presentation that I did send, then it can be shown, but later, not now. Thank you.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much. And again, apologies for that. Laurent was going to share with us also some statistics on the characteristics of the complaints and grievances received, etc. But we'll ensure that we get that information to you. So Laurent, thank you very much for your presentation. Again, very interesting. And I think this has been, if I'm not mistaken, a bit of pioneering work in Malawi in terms of having a call center as the primary mechanism for a government-run social protection program. And it's an experience that is being looked at very closely to see what potential it has for broadening out, for upscaling, or using it as a model in other parts of the country. Again, I'm sure we will receive some questions because there are lots of issues you raised. And again, I'd like to appreciate your honesty, your openness in also raising the challenges that have been experienced so that we can learn not just from what works well, but also learn from the experiences of some of the challenges that have been experienced. Is this your slide that has just come up?
Yes, I think so.
So while I've been filling the time, I think we can offer you, we're still on the right side of the clock. So please, your opportunity, thank you, to maybe just speak to some of those statistics. Was it that slide or was it another one you wanted? I think it was another slide. Can we scroll down?
This one is, this one is just basically about how much we have been able to disperse under the COVID-19 cash transfer. So out of our target of 199,000 households, beneficiaries, we were able to disperse to at least approximately 140,000, roughly 70% of our target. Then in terms of volumes of the calls by month, so by March, when the call center had been set and when we were at the first disbursements were being made, we had the 737 cases incoming, calls incoming, and they peaked between April and May, and this is basically the time that the transfers also had been made. So there were so many calls, people trying to inquire about when will they receive their money or something like that. And then, as you can see, is that the graphs usually the trend is it declines to something like 8 in November. The reason being that now we are no longer paying. So most of the beneficiaries that we are calling had to do with finding out when they will be paid, among other things. Then in terms of type of call center, you can see majority of calls were from beneficiaries, and while we also had calls from also ineligible and rejected households who wanted to find out why they had been left out of the program. And during this course, they would be informed that they were not selected for the program for the reason that they did not meet the required criteria. Calls were also received from non-registered households, and often these households claimed to have the receipt code that we gave them at registration. But maybe it was something that they would just pick randomly, maybe from elsewhere, which was not in our system when we checked. We checked for retrieval. I think finally, this should be the final slide in terms of in that regard. By type of calls, so majority of calls from beneficiaries were information calls, inquiring when transfers would be made, and many households with ineligible and registered and rejected also called to go about their position in the program. And as you can see, so the beneficiaries made up pointed out the that came to the yeah, I think that's those are the few slides that I wanted to
okay, thank you very much, Laurent. That's great, thank you. I'm glad we were able to bring those ones up in the nick of time, and that was very helpful to give us some data there to chew on. So thanks very much again, Laurent, for the presentation. We'll be coming back to you. I know there's a couple of questions that are being that have come up, so be prepared for that later. For now, what we'll do is to move on to our third presenter, Mr. Abid Gulzar, who's based in Cambodia, and he's the Senior Inclusive Governance Advisor in the Asia Pacific region for CARE International. And he's going to be talking to us about the role of community scorecards in enhancing social accountability. So Abid, the floor is yours. We look forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tony. It's wonderful to be part of this webinar. And good evening and good afternoon. I'm not sure which time zone you are. So good evening is here. So hopefully this presentation will help you to maybe take you through some of the learnings we had. So what I will do actually, I'll be presenting CARE's experience in social accountability, as well as I would like to share what's our lesson learned over the period of time in implementation of this approach, particularly community scorecard, and how it's helping us. Next slide, please. The main contents I'm going to cover is start with the social accountability. What are the concepts and definitions of social accountability, community scorecard and its methodology, what are the different programs and its impact, what challenges did we face, what are the opportunities, and what are lessons learned, how we are actually trying to scale up community scorecard approach across the programs using technology. So I will close with this learning towards the end. Next slide, please. Let me start with actually the concept of social accountability. Social accountability is defined as a citizen-driven accountability, an approach that relies on civic engagement and transparency methods and tools to improve governance functions and the management of public services. public, how we manage resources, and how we actually provide direct services to communities. Social accountability elevates community voices, engaging power holders and negotiating for expanded, more inclusive, safe spaces for dialogue, promotes mutual accountability. Social accountability approaches were developed mainly to help citizens address problems related to poor service provisions like poor education, poor health service delivery, with the goal of linking citizens for high quality, responsive, and contextually appropriate programming and solutions which are appropriate to the local context. That's how this whole approach was designed. And according to some estimate, over 8.2 million people in 33 countries have benefited from better health, stronger food system, safer justice system after participating in community scorecard processes. Next slide, please. The community scorecard was developed by Malawi in 2002 as a tool to address local challenges and has been recognized globally as an important solution for high quality, responsive, and contextually appropriate programming. And community scorecard is a participatory tool for assessment, planning, monitoring, and evaluation of services that enable communities members and service providers to work together to score services delivery challenges against set indicators. The results are then discussed in an interface meeting, and a plan of action is developed to address identified service delivery challenges. A community scorecard is normally have increasingly being adapted to different sectors. It was originally started with health and education, but now it has been used for many other sectors, such as gender-based violence, water and sanitation, etc. In community scorecard process, we actually assess services at the smallest unit level of service. For example, we can go assess services of village health center or primary school. So these could be at a very micro level. The core implementation strategy is normally using dialogue to engage both service users and service providers. The main goal is positively influencing the quality of efficiency and accountability of services for working in partnership with citizens and service providers to implement and track the effectiveness of those solutions which has been jointly agreed by community and the service providers. Next slide, please. If you look at this, this really helps not just the communities, but actually it also helps to improve image of government as well as build trust between citizens and government. And that's the tool which I want to present is through some of the its methodology. If you look at it, has 5 phases, how it goes through from one to another. Let me take you through how important this process itself is. The process has 5 phases as seen in the diagram. In brief, the community scorecard engages service users and frontline service providers in an issue generation exercise that is done through focus group discussion to understand what is going well, what is not going well, and what can be done to improve the situation when it's come to particular services which the citizens are monitoring. These issues are then grouped according to similarities and perspective-based indicators, and then it's led to develop some clear indicators for assessment phase. The indicators are taken back to the community and service providers, and then they score according to how well the indicators are doing in the community and what are the perspective about those indicators. Through phase 4, then service user, frontline provider, district level government decision maker, as well as other stakeholders in the sector come together to discuss indicators and discuss locally relevant solutions to priority issues and co-create an action plan to deal with. Once that is done, it doesn't really end there, because we start monitoring implementation of plans of action, and then we actually move to the repeat this process again. And that process continues until the communities actually face that either this has now the service is perfect, or actually they keep improving or raising the bar of services they receive at the local level. Next slide, please. Now, I will share with you some of the examples. These are just some of the examples of different sectors we have been using our community scorecard that really helped us to improve quality of services they receive. For example, in Rwanda, Rwanda's Vulnerable Women program for improving quality of gender-based violence prevention and enhancing women's agency and voice was a very, very critical program for us, where community scorecard played an important role. Similarly, we had a few other sectors like a food security program and building resilience project in Malawi, which was then also scaled up in Mozambique, Zambia. That was actually one of the important help us to understand that how we share those learning and then move to the other contexts. So the primary goal of those projects was sustainable, equitable, and resilient food and nutrition security for ultra poor and chronically vulnerable households in various districts. Stages to and Leave No Girl Behind project was Stages 2 was an education focused program implemented in Afghanistan, and successor program, which is the next generation of the same program focusing education, was Leave No Girl Behind in Afghanistan. And that was an excellent project which reached to 73 districts across 70 provinces to improve access to education in Afghanistan. Next slide, please. And this is a very unique project for me because I have seen very few examples globally for such project. In Ghana, we actually implemented Ghana Strengthening Accountability Mechanism, or GSAM in abbreviation, is another unique project. The project actually contributed significantly towards promoting accountable and responsive local governance as a result of the increased civil society participation and oversight of capital development project. Why it's unique? Actually, it linked a formal what you call this accountability mechanism, what is called social the audit process. So that audit process was linked to social audit, and then that really helped us to improve quality of service delivery in that. So as an impact, we have seen the project carried out the dissemination of formal performance audit results in 50 out of 100 districts, and provided citizens to opportunity to hold duty bearers accountable. Next slide, please. We actually, it's because sometimes in social accountability, evidence is one of the major gap. But interestingly, in Malawi, we had a scientific methodology, randomized randomized control trial assessments done in Malawi maternal health project, and that actually showed that the findings are significantly impacted the results on achieving access to modern contraceptive, which shows that with an estimate of 57% greater use in intervention versus control conditions at endline, as well as impact in behavior change, improved service delivery, communication, and sustainability. Next slide, please. Now, I think I'll quickly go through maybe challenges and opportunity. Challenges, number one, it's sometimes the community scorecards are done at the village level, at one school level. They were never actually shared, connected with other schools in or health centers in one village or in one commune. So that was the missing gap actually. And it was very difficult because of the lack of systems in place to connect the different data sets. Then vertical linkages, because lots of issues could not be resolved at the local level. They needed actually response from the higher level. And that was also a gap in the social accountability, and lack of discussions within the civil society on how to use this data for advocacy and policy influence. And in this, we had an opportunity to use technology. Next slide, please. We figured out lesson learns. A few lesson learns are there has to be good enough policy and rules and regulation which are actually required so that we can actually implement community participation approaches, different social accountability approaches are required for different stakeholders. Interdependency of social accountability mechanisms at local, subnational, national level are absolutely critical. So we have to work with all of them at least to support each other. Next slide, please. This is an example, actually. I won't go in detail, but we have tested in Malawi our digital community scorecard, which is now aggregating our data at the low, from different program sites to at district level, at provincial level, and at the national level. That data, the system which we have developed with the support of Quantu, which is a social enterprise, and that is helping us to now scale this whole community scorecard at the larger level. Next slide, please. Now, we have this actually piloted in Malawi. I also shared that, and this is, we are trying to move forward in other communities. Next slide, please. Now, what is our next plans? We are working underway in Afghanistan, Nepal, Uganda, and DRC, and other countries. This should be Philippines, Bangladesh, Kenya, and Ghana. We are trying to actually, these pipelines projects which we have here, actually we are trying to scale up in a more effective way. Interestingly, we are trying to use this in COVID adapted responses as well, and CSE approach to support more inclusive, accountable humanitarian responses. We are trying to develop this approach and test in a couple of countries beyond just Africa now, because we have tested in Africa, and now we are trying to scale this up in Asia as well. Next slide, please. If you have any questions about this, yes, we have a number of experts here based in Africa. You can approach them and we'll be happy to respond to your questions and queries. Thank you.
Abid, thank you very much indeed. You did a wonderful job to keep to time. I think you saw me sending some messages, but you managed that extremely well. So we appreciate that. A lot of information. I'm sure participants will have an opportunity to look in more detail at some of the information that was on your slides. For me, very interesting, looking at rather than an individual mechanism for registering complaints and grievances about service delivery, which is obviously through GRM, but using a community approach. So it will certainly be interesting to see the relationship between those two types of mechanisms for engaging service providers. So I think we'll come back to that during our discussion. At this stage, I'd just like to again thank you for your presentation, and we'll move on now to our fourth and last final presentation, which will be delivered by Mr. Davies Luhanga, who works with the World Bank in Malawi at the Malawi Country Office, a specialist in social protection, who's going to be talking to us about grievance redress mechanisms for social protection programs. So Davies, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Santone. As said, my name is Davies Luhanga. I'm the social development specialist for World Bank Malawi. So I'll be taking you through social safeguards, trying to define them, and also to look at where grievance redress mechanisms come in and how they are important and how they can be applied in the social protection programs. Next slide, please. So, as said, I will first of all look at the whole concept of environmental and social safeguards, and trying to look at it, what is it that we do in social and environmental safeguards in practice. Then I'm going to dive more on the grievance redress mechanisms and trying to look at the principles and how one can set up an effective GRM, and trying to look at the important value chain in the GRM and what is it that you can do and what you cannot do as you implement your GRM. Next slide, please. So when we talk about safeguards, it's all about the environment, managing environmental and social risks and impacts. So in safeguards, we recognize that every project that would be implemented, that can be implemented, will have impacts on the human population as well as the environment. So these impacts could be positive or negative. So in safeguards, we try to enhance the positives and put mitigation measures for the adverse impacts. So what we're trying to do is taking all reasonable steps to prevent and avoid harm on human population and the environment. And the principle that we follow in putting up mitigation measures, first and foremost, we ensure that we avoid the risk that may come with the implementing activities. That's what we always try to strive. But when we cannot avoid, we try to minimize or reduce the risks and impacts. Once the risks and impacts have been minimized or reduced, now we look at mitigating the risks. And where significant residual impacts remain, what we normally seek for is compensation or offsetting where technically and financially feasible. So this is what we call a mitigation hierarchy. So it's avoidance, minimization, mitigation, and compensation. Next slide, please. So what really happens is when you are setting up your project, at the very beginning, you are looking at screening the project activities, the actual activities that you'll be carrying out, trying to look at when you carry out activity A, what social issues are likely to come out. Similarly, you look at what environmental issues are going to come out. So when you're looking at the whole, when you are undertaking your environmental and social safeguards, you screen out for those likely impacts and you're aiming at mitigating those impacts so that they should not come. Next slide, please. So yes, as I said, at the beginning of your project, you have to screen out your project activities for potential environmental and social risks and impacts. And this is usually done at project preparation stage. So when you kind of conceptualize what will come, so that at that early stage, you have to seek to put up mitigation measures. So in that kind of order, in that kind of hierarchy where you are trying to say, where possible, you need to avoid those risks. But if you can't avoid, then you should look at minimizing or reducing and mitigating. And when everything else has failed, then you have to compensate. And what you do is this screening process is the one that will inform more detailed assessments. And in broader sense, or you talk about environment and social assessment. So primarily what you're looking at, it's a primary means of ensuring projects are environmentally and socially sound and sustainable. And this will be used to inform decision making. So environmental and social assessment process is a flexible process, and it uses different tools and methods depending on the details and the nature of the project that you are implementing. So there are a number of methods and tools that are used to carry out the environmental and social assessments. These would include among the several that are there, the environmental and social impact assessment, environmental and social audit, hazard or risk assessment, SIA, which is cumulative impact assessment, social and conflict analysis, environmental and social management plans, which is a common one, which really comes from environmental social management framework. You also talk about regional SIA, sectoral SIA, strategic SIA. It all depends on the nature of project that you have and the details that are available. Next slide, please. So, I said that every project, when you're implementing, it's likely to have to impact on the environment and the social fabric in a number of ways. It could be positive or could be negative. And whenever you have the negative impacts, you're trying to minimize or mitigate. But even after you've mitigated, as you implement the project, you are likely to have concerns, grievances that are going to come from project affected parties. So people have issues with the activities that are being, with the effects that the projects are going to be bringing. So it's always important that you set up your grievance redress mechanism, which will be absorbing, resolving all the issues, all the concerns, all the grievances that are going to come related to the project. It's just like in a marriage. When you don't resolve your issues, you are likely to fail. So similar as you implement your project, in order to have a smooth implementation process, you need to have a resolution mechanism for all your grievances. So that's why we kind of, we emphasize on setting up a grievance redress mechanism for all the projects, including even the social protection projects that we implement. So in a nutshell, grievance redress mechanism is a system by which complaints and dissatisfaction arising out of implementation are communicated, tracked, and resolved. So grievance mechanisms respond to concerns and grievances of project affected parties related to the environment and social performance of the project. So the grievances would either be environmental or social. And there are principles, and in setting up the grievance, we follow the proportionality principle, which looks at the number of activities and the nature. So the level of the GRM will depend on the complexity of the project. So the grievance mechanism is expected to address concerns promptly and efficiently and in a transparent manner. And usually there's also emphasis on the grievance mechanism being culturally appropriate and readily accessible to all affected parties at no cost and without retribution. So the mechanism will not prevent access to judicial or administrative remedies. So much as you have this grievance redress mechanism, you also have project beneficiaries will also have access to the courts or other means like the police to resolve the grievances. Next slide, please. So there are a number of principles that you have to consider in order to have effective grievance an effective grievance mechanism. So you talk about fairness, objectivity. It has to be simple and accessible to the project parties, and has to be respond to issues, concerns in a more effective, timely manner. And you also seek to give feedback to your to the complainant. Next slide, please. So when you're setting up a grievance mechanism, basically you're looking at receiving the complaints, the grievances, and this, you're also looking at processing, tracking the complaints, and giving a resolution feedback to the complainants. So the first stage you are looking at receiving, you are recording, and then the resolution part, and you give feedback to the complainant. Next slide, please. So basically you're looking at the uptake, where you have a number of channels, and you ensure that you have grievance uptake channels, different grievance channels, so that complainants should have a number of options to lodge the complaint. So when you receive the complaint, it's recorded and processed, and you acknowledge receipt. And then there's that process where you are trying to resolve But most important of it all, at the end, you need to give feedback to the people who had raised their grievance so that a resolution is known to all. Next slide, please. So there are a number of do's and don'ts that you need to consider. I'll quickly run through them. When you are recording grievances, you must ensure that you have accessible uptake channels. So that's why you have a number of channels, and you also maintain a log of your grievances. Make sure they are being recorded, and the procedure must be known to all, so it must be publicized, and ensure that you don't create any grievances in the uptake of complaints. So it must be accessible. Next slide, please. So when you are monitoring at the second stage, you have to clearly outline who is responsible for handling what. So the responsibilities must be well known. When a complaint is received, it must be very clear how it's going to be processed. So, and there must be a well-established timeline at every stage. Next slide, please. Again, when you're giving feedback, what is also emphasized is make sure you contact users to explain how their complaint was resolved. So feedback is very, very important, and ensure that you publicize results of your investigations to enhance visibility of and increase trust in the GRM. Next slide, please. That was the last slide. So those are do's and don'ts. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Davis, for providing us also with an overview of some of the basic principles that we need to remind ourselves with in terms of GRMs. And I think some of those issues also were highlighted in some of the other presentations, but also linking the whole notion of GRM as a mechanism to that broader issue of social and environmental safeguards. So thank you very much indeed, Davies, for your presentation. And that brings us to the end of the formal presentations. And from now, we're going to do two things. First of all, ahead of the event, I prepared a question each for each presenter, and I'm going to now present that question to each in turn and ask them to speak to that issue. And thereafter, we will go through some of the questions that we've been receiving from participants, and I will communicate those questions to the relevant panelist, and we'll see how we can go from there. So to begin with, I'm going to ask a question to Nana, and of course, before moving on to the next question, maybe there will be others from the panel who might wish to comment on what Nana has said, or may feel that they have something to add to that conversation. So it's not just for Nana, but it's primarily directed to her, but others are free to come in. So my first question, Nana, and I think you saw the question already, but let me read it out so everyone can hear it. The question is, what are the main design and operational challenges that one needs to take account of in trying to harmonize GRMs around a single process? Are you able to speak to that question and give us some maybe top tips on what are some of the stumbling blocks or some of the issues we need to be mindful of as we try to harmonize? Harmonization sounds very nice, but we know it's not easy to do. So over to you, Nana.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for the question. Just like you said, harmonizing the grievance redress hasn't been easy for us. Using Ghana as an example, we are still doing the harmonization. Not all the programs have been harmonized. Their MIS has been harmonized into the single window. Some of the challenges that facing some of the challenges are, all the programs have unique MIS systems, and for them to be synchronized onto the single window, they all have their designs, they all have their requirements, what they require to be added onto the system. And it becomes a bit challenging because they have also equally spent money and other things to have their system set up. And then you are telling them that all of a sudden, come, let's synchronize their system to the main system. What happens to theirs? You understand? So there's kind of like the unwillingness of some of the programs to be synchronized to the system. Then other challenges that some of the programs there we had, for example, LEAP, their forms are different and the design is totally different from what the design of some of the forms that we have on the system. So the system would have to be adjusted to be able to fit into the LEAP program, how the IMS system is. And then some of them too, maybe in terms of security and other things, feel that for them to synchronize their system with a single window, the main, in terms of security, who views what, you know, but we have put certain measures in place. We are still in talks, measures in place where that particular program, if a case is sent to that particular program, will only have access to their information. No other program would have that access unless there are certain things that program needs assistance from another program, particular places where the security will be allowed. So these are some of the challenges in synchronizing the GRMs together, because they all have different systems. It hasn't been easy because it's been back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Even though we have some systems currently synchronized to the system, not all of them are synchronized to the system. Okay. I can't hear you. It looks like
yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I was saying that's very interesting, and I think it will probably be familiar. There are technology issues there about the communications between different technology platforms. There are governance issues, also about administrative rights, privileges, and then issues, I guess, about purpose and the objectives of what you're trying to achieve with the system.
Exactly.
So what would your, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I guess all these things are issues that have to be addressed early on in the design. Otherwise, you're just going to get caught up later on in the process.
Yes. These issues, when it was being designed, like I said earlier, these issues are being was addressed, like all these challenges was addressed at the start of the design of the the unified case management system. But like I said earlier, even though there were discussions on before the thing was designed, not all the programs have currently been synchronized to the system.
I'm just losing you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
If you could just repeat your last line, and then I think we'll be okay.
Okay, what I said was, not all the programs have currently been synchronized to the system. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Nana. Unless anybody else of the panel wishes to add anything to that conversation, I'll move on to the next question. All right, let me move on to the next question. The next question is for Laurent, who spoke to us about the Kuchi call center in Malawi, which is currently if I understand correctly, is a single program rather than harmonized around different programs. It was around the specific intervention COVID response in the urban centers. And my question to you, Laurent, is as following. Maintaining trust and confidence in the system is critical. What can undermine the system credibility the fastest? What is it that can undermine system credibility? And what are those mitigation actions that we can take to prevent that from happening? I hope my question is clear. I hope it's relevant. Over to you, Laurent, to perhaps respond.
Thank you. What can undermine the system's credibility, especially in the context of our case, where we had, for example, to target and handle so many issues within a shortest period of time. Number one, there is an issue of the robustness of the system itself to be able to handle complex matters of data processes timely in sync with the expectations of management, stakeholders, as well as the kind of people that you wanted to target. From our experiences is that when you have a system that does not give you the required results in a manner that is expected by the, say, for example, beneficiaries, stakeholders, and everybody, usually you tend to lose, the system tends to lose credibility. And eventually, if you are being supported by partners, they may end up start to think of looking for another system to work on. There are also issues of how is the system coordinated? Does it serve all the key stakeholders, key partners that are part of the coordination structure? If you have a system that is, for example, appears to be only in terms of ownership and coordinated by one party and is and monopolizing it, then most likely in a context where the system is supposed to serve several stakeholders, or obviously it loses credibility. Others will start building their own system silos away from the system that you want to use. I can't get you.
Sorry, it was me again. Yes, Laurent, thank you very much for that response. And I should, by the way, remind our speakers, as you come on, please do show us your face. We do want to see you as well as hear you. So at this stage, it would be nice to see you when you do speak. So please, if you can do that. Laurent, what you're saying is obviously very important. And again, I guess there are issues which can, you talk about in a sense, the robustness, the ability of the system to respond according to standards. I mean, do you see that mainly as a technology issue, a kind of design specification issue? Is it more process issues? Is it human error, oversight, governance? What do you see as the sort of the weak link in the chain, so to speak?
Like in some cases, like in our case, I usually see as a technological issue vis-a-vis to do with the capacity. In a context where you want a system like ours to really serve you very, very efficiently, effectively, and timely, you need a lot of capacities, while at the same time you need an update technology that helps you with that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Laurent. In the interest of time, we'll continue to move on. And my next question will be for Abid. So Abid, when you respond, please put on your camera. My question is, to what extent can community scorecards, the type of approaches that you've described, be combined with GRMs to improve social delivery, social service delivery, and strengthen accountability?
Well, very good question. I think when I was listening to the other presentations, I was thinking, okay, there is a huge opportunity for us to really explore how we link both of them together. For example, the helplines are directed to provide certain services. They are to provide, resolve issues, and then the whole redress mechanism, how it functions. So we can actually create those services into an indicators, then take it to community. Those who receive services, we ask them to rate, and then come back and then have the similar kind of session with our those who are resolving those helplines or issues through helpline. We conduct the scorecard with them and then come back, bring both groups together to discuss those challenges and issues and develop plan of action and improve those issues. Sometimes some issues are, we don't need actually a lot of money for that. We only need to correct certain processes, certain understandings, and maybe to have a different perspective to look at those things. So there is an absolute possibilities, and there could be an even better model available for other countries to look at how social protection can actually use communities scorecard. Just to mention that community scorecard originally was designed for what you call unit of service. So the helpline or where you're receiving calls, that is the unit. And I think there could be a further department linked to it, but overall this redress mechanism could take on and adapt community scorecard and use it effectively. And I'm absolutely sure this is absolutely possible. And we can also look at some of the other models where, for example, in Nepal, we use this for assessing services within a police station, how the police station protect women's protection services are being provided, and there were women protection committees were available, so how they are actually taking part in this and whether those services are effective or not, something like that. So similarly, I think we can use this approach for social protection programming as well. I hope I answered your question now.
I think you've started what could be an interesting conversation. Unfortunately, the time allowed in this webinar doesn't allow us to really engage further, but I think there are lots of potential areas there that could be explored. So I think that's
there was another question actually, which I'm not sure if you're asking again, that another question from Adonis. I think if you're asking this question.
Don't worry about those questions now. I'll be coming back to you with that later.
Okay,
so for now, that was just my question as moderator, but then we will go through another round, and there is indeed a question or two for you. So we'll be back shortly to you. For the time being, thank you. And let me just turn to Davies, who talked about GRMs and also about social safeguards. And usually we think, well, the concept of social safeguards steers us or directs us towards recognizing the need for GRMs. But I want to turn this around and ask, from the experience of looking at what GRMs brings to the table, what has it sort of taught us about the need for building safeguards? Are there new areas? Maybe we make assumptions about what we need to cater for, but the GRMs are raising issues that we hadn't thought about or hadn't given the priority that we thought was important. So I don't know, Davies, whether you've been able to look at some of the experiences there.
Thank you, Anthony. I think what I look at is no project can be implemented effectively or efficiently without a GRM. So a GRM will always be necessary in a project, because a project at the beginning will be screened for potential risks and impacts. So once the screening is done, obviously you like to find the likelihood that you have both maybe impacts on the environment as well as on the social fabric. So you seek to mitigate those impacts. And as you implement your project, even at the design stage of any project, you should be thinking about designing your GRM, depending on the complexity or the nature of your project. So yeah, you should be looking at how are you going to be receiving grievances, because I do not see any project that can be implemented without issues. Every project is likely to have some issues, maybe from the stakeholders. As the activities are being carried out, the likelihood that you have concerns, grievances coming out from the communities in your project impact areas or your stakeholders is high. So you always need to have these grievance redress mechanisms. And as you are designing it, you need to properly think through what you need to have in this particular system that you are building. So you look at the intake channels that are quite accessible to all the stakeholders. So it's very important. How are you going to resolve it? Setting all the timeframes, because how are you going to record your grievances and doing all the monitoring and giving feedback? So a GRM will always be at the center of an effective project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Davies, for your response. That then brings us to the end of that first round of questions. Those were my questions, as I said. So I used the privilege of being the moderator to deliver those questions. But we have, in the meantime, been collecting quite a number of questions from participants. And now is an opportunity to have a Q&A session. Basically, we've got the questions written down. I'm going to now communicate those questions, indicating who they're from, who they are to, and what the question is. And we will just see how many questions we can handle in the remaining roughly 20, 25 minutes that we have at our disposal. So my first question is from a colleague at GIZ, who I refer to as Pasha. Her full name is Twapasha Twe, so which I pronounce very badly, I'm afraid. My apologies. And the question is actually directed to two persons. It's both to Nana and to Laurent. So in terms, and the question is, to what extent has communications and awareness raising been a key role, play a key role in raising acceptability and understanding of call centers? I don't know who wants to answer first, either Nana or Laurent. Whoever gets there first can go. Who would like to speak to that issue, the role of communications and awareness raising in ensuring that people fully understand what the call center is, how it operates, to allay whatever concerns or fears they may have? Nana, is that something you could speak to from the experience in Ghana?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes,
yes.
Okay. All right. So, Anthony, in terms of communication and awareness creation, in Ghana, we've done a couple of them. And what we have done, I think the first one we did in terms of communication is we visited the various lorry stations, bus terminals, and then we gave out flyers, and then we explained to the people there what the call center is all about and why they should call the call center and all that. We've also produced jingles in different languages, our main languages, about 8 languages, English inclusive. So what we do is that when we do this sensitizations, when we go to the market centers and all that, we use the community centers. They have community information centers where they have speakers where once we play the jingle in that particular area, the language and that is mainly used in that particular area, people get to hear about it and then people call. Other communication channels that we've also done is that we've started with visiting various radio stations and then sensitizing the public about the essence of the call center, why people should call if they have any complaints. So in terms of communication, that is what Ghana, that is what we've started with. Currently, that's what we started with in terms of communication. And then we also have social media. We use the Facebook and all that. And then we've also created some sort of account where people can actually key in their complaints as well. So it's all part of our communication strategy. So this is what we are currently doing. I hope that has answered the question.
Thank you very much, Nana. I think that certainly went a long way in answering the question. I think it would be good if we could also hear from Laurent, because again, what happened in the Malawi context is that this was in a sense, a rapid response with the advent of COVID, so that the time involved was also much more shortened. There wasn't that same developmental phase, I imagine. So I'd be interested to know how you got the community, how you got the message out.
Okay, thank you. Like in our case, we alongside the I think the designing and implementation of the targeting processes and the associated activities that came on. We also had in parallel a set of communication activities, right from the targeting, even before we commenced the targeting, to immediately begin telling people in the communities that there is this coming, and this is what was going to be happening, and these are the expectations. So we had the contacts with the local leaders who do spread messages in the communities, in the locations of the urban. We also had the some messages on radio, and some on the television, and as well as we also had the face-to-face contacts in some cases, especially for the teams that were going out to do the KYC requirements. They were also going out with messages that were being provided to the communities, to the beneficiaries. And this, we were also telling them about the existence, for example, of a call center, and the mechanisms for how they can access that particular call center. There are also structures for what we are calling GRM committees in the locations and at the community level. So these committees were also engaged to serve as an immediate platform for case intake and processing, in case some do not access the call center like that. So there were these multiple sets of communication ways that were utilized in terms of, and that helped to make sure that the call center is really popularized within the time that we were implementing them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurent. I hope that also answers, satisfies the person who raised that question. Pasha, I think now you have some insights from both experiences. Now, Nana, there's a couple more questions I have for you, but one of them I think got actually answered. I just want to recognize that Langa Malidadi asked a question about the seamlessness of the system and the interface between individual program MIS systems. But I think you went some way to respond to that when we talked about the challenges of setting up a harmonized system. So I think for now, I'll take it that has been responded to, but would like to thank Langa for his or her question. But there's one other question that Odonis Sibenge from Zambia asks, Nana. And if I follow correctly, the question is, look, we have the call center, but what about for those people who, for whatever reason, don't have access to phones or digital technology to enable them to use this primary interface? Is there a sort of fallback secondary system that can be used? And I can imagine, although this wasn't in the question, that this may be the case more in rural areas, maybe not. But is there an issue? Is there a fallback system which people can use if the sort of toll-free number isn't working, or for whatever reason they don't have access because they don't have a phone. Nana, over to you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Okay, so the fallback system, what we are doing currently is that in areas where people cannot have access to the toll-free line, with support of EU, we are trying to have this small working centers in the district assemblies. We are strengthening the district assemblies client service. So if someone has issues and then they can't call on us, there are district assemblies which are closer to them. They can just walk into the district assembly client service and then make the complaint. Once they do that, the client service representative there will forward the complaint to us, and then we'll get back to the complainant. So that is what we are currently doing. We just started on a pilot basis. I think 3 of our regions, we just started with it, I think about 2 or 3 months ago, the pilot basis. So that is what we are currently doing to assist those who do not have access to the toll-free. And then what we've also done is that once we go on monitoring, lead monitoring in these rural areas, we speak to their community focal persons. Most of the community focal persons, where they are not situated in the remote areas. So some of them are able to get into contact with them. So if they do, they make the report on behalf of them. And then we equally use the chiefs and other local authorities as well. So we've had issues where people have complained through their chiefs, their queen mothers, the traditional authorities, and then it's come to us. And then we have dealt through the traditional authority to the local indigene. So that's how currently, that's the system that we are using. I hope I've answered the question.
Thank you, Nana. Thanks very much for adding that, for those explanations. Now we'll give you a break, Nana, because there may be another question coming your way, but I'll give you a break now and move to one of the other panelists. Abid, I have a very practical question for you. A couple of people want to know, where can we get more information? And let me just get this quite right. Where can we get more information on the digital approach towards community scorecards?
Yeah, Petra, thank you so much for your question.
Participants, can you, is it something you can immediately provide or follow up with? I don't know.
Great, lovely. I think this is a very good practical question. And at the end of the, I think this recording will be shared, plus also PowerPoint presentation. And if you look at the last slide, I have added names of the people, plus also their email addresses. You can actually write to them, any one of them. So 4, including myself, we can direct you to the right person to find the right resources, especially on digital community scorecard. Because currently we are in a process to develop a global citizen data hub, and that's under process right now. And we will definitely be able to share resources, more resources in coming days. But whatever we have experienced and lesson learned, we can share with you right away. Just write to them, any one of them.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's quite clear. So we have the slides, we can approach them and get the information directly or a referral. Thank you, Abid. Now, Davies, we have a question from Pasha, who asks, how can safeguards be applied in the context of unconditional cash transfers?
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you, Pasha, for that question. Yes, application of safeguards in unconditional cash transfer programs. Yes, unconditional cash transfer, as you're putting it, it's a program. So, and when we're talking about safeguards, we are mainly looking at putting up mitigation measures for possible risks and impacts. So similarly, when you are designing your unconditional cash transfer programs, you may need to screen out for potential impacts and impacts and risks. So you still need to go back to safeguards to say, okay, we have these potential risks and impacts. How can we mitigate them? So for you to have a framework for mitigating impacts, adverse impacts and risks that come with the unconditional cash transfers, you need to lean on safeguards so that you can have proper frameworks like environmental and social management plans. So without safeguards, you would not have such kind of frameworks. So that becomes very important. And for you also in your, as you implement your unconditional social cash transfers, you need also to put up a grievance redress mechanism, and all this has a leaning on safeguards. So safeguards are quite important and quite should just be part of your unconditional social cash transfers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Davies. Just have a few more questions. One is going back to Ghana. I told you, Nana, we'd be back to you. This is a question from George Juwawo. He asks, he says the feedback loop is vital in GRM system, but also the issue of cost comes in. What is the Ghana experience? Is there a model to estimate those costs prior at a project development stage? Is that question clear to you, Nana, in terms of what is being asked about costs and the costs of feedback loops?
I'm not really getting the question. What exactly does he want? Yes.
Yeah,
if,
okay.
If the question can be reframed, yes.
If George
if it can be reframed.
He can just rephrase the question and get back to us. Please, George, do that, because I think it's an important question. We just need to get a little bit more precision. And I think for Laurent, meantime, we have a question also from Adonis, who was commenting on the some of what appeared maybe like misunderstanding or misinformation on the part of the community members who are claiming entitlements or rights to receiving benefits, which were not the case. I think that was picked up maybe from some of your statistics. And so the question relates to what's been done, because that seems to perhaps be an issue in terms on the side of management, in terms of the team going through the targeting process, or in terms of communicating the eligibility criteria. Have those kind of issues been resolved in a way that this has reduced the number of times or the incidence of those concerns? Is that applicable in the Kuchi program, given the cycle that's being pursued there of payments? Laurent, is that something you feel you can respond to?
Yes. So, like in our case, what we noted is that they were, I think they were just trying to test waters by simply trying different tricks altogether, thinking that the system would be tricked into maybe making another payment or making it, not knowing that there were so many layers of checking. Immediately, as I pointed out, was that the national ID was very, very, very critical. So in such cases, if you ask, even if it changes the phone number, but it will be something that is already backed by an ID that is already existing in the system. So immediately the system will reject. But there was also a question of when we were collecting at registration, collecting data, there was a unique code for the program that was attached to each household. So whenever it's calling, if really the household was registered, that code, or say, give us the code, and the operator would say, and check into the system to find that, oh no, I think this is the issue here. Maybe it's already paid, or maybe I think it has not been, it was not selected. Therefore, you would just begin with the necessary information to say you were not selected because of, say, you didn't meet the eligibility. So that's really what the system. So it was there were so many checks right from the targeting, registration, enrollment, and even at the point of our service providers, the mobile money operators that were paying on our behalf with the beneficiaries. They also had their own checks in terms of making sure that they do due diligence, know your customer requirements on each and every. So all those provided checks. But as I'm saying, what we noted was that they thought that the systems would be tricky. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurent. Meantime, George has clarified, and that's exactly where I thought the question was going. It's one thing receiving complaints. It's another thing to actually respond and ensure that there is the appropriate feedback, investigation and feedback to the beneficiaries or the complainant. And often this costs money, and lack of operating budget can get in the way of things. So I think the question to you, Nana, is to what extent were those issues of ensuring adequacy of budget so that the system can follow up, do the investigation, provide the feedback in an appropriate manner to whoever has been making the complaint. I think this is an issue which is common in many jurisdictions. So it would be good to know how that's been addressed in Ghana. Nana, the floor is yours.
In terms of cost, like I said in my presentation, all the programs have their budgets in terms of resolving complaints. Let's take, for instance, let me use LEAP, Labor Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty, the cash grant. Now, what happens is that if, let's take, somebody has issues with a card, the e-switch card that gives, complaints about the e-switch card that gives them money, and it has to be replaced. The costs per the budget comes from LEAP. I think every year they have budgets per what they receive from the government in terms of the amounts that they give, the grants that they give to the beneficiaries. So all those things are factored into it. So in terms of resolving the complaints, there's a place where the complainant wouldn't have to pay any amount of money because that has already been covered in the budget. So the complainant will go to the district assembly, speak to a social welfare officer who will assist him or her through the LEAP office in Accra to get a new card. Just like I said, most of our costs comes from the individual programs, especially those who are being sponsored by the donors as well as the government. So all these are factored in the budget. For the social protection programs, most of them have their costs being factored in the budget. But the only challenge that we have is when it's a non-social protection program and the issue has to be resolved. It goes through a lot of processes, and then each unit that handles the case will have to bear the costs of resolving that particular issue at that particular time. I hope Anthony, you understand where I'm coming from. So that's hello, Anthony.
Hi, I'm here. Don't worry,
Yes.
I'm listening. Thank you.
Yeah.
No.
Yes. So that's how our cost system is. For the social protection program, in terms of costs, like I said, each program is responsible for that. So that it's in the budget as they do their programs. So it's taken care of per what is allocated to that particular program for complaints. So that's basically it. I hope I've answered his question. You know, it's in terms of
right,
cost,
fine. Well,
yes,
if not, yeah, I'm sure there'll be an opportunity for the question for the two of you to maybe discuss afterwards.
Sure. So that I really get, yes, I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Okay, no, we appreciate it. Thank you, Nana, for answering so many questions. We're just about done. The clock is turning, and so we're about to wind up. I just wanted to acknowledge one question from Gift Mwembe from Concern Worldwide here in Malawi. He hasn't directed the question to anyone in particular, but the question reads, and maybe it's a good fitting way to end, especially as we're doing a midterm review. There's one of the core functions of GRM is to respond to the issue on time and close the case within the shortest time possible. I think it's also a point that Davies made. In your own assessments with GRMs in Malawi, do you think we are doing right? So I think that's a question perhaps that goes to all of us who are working here in Malawi. And I'm not going to direct that to anybody to make a response unless anybody volunteers to do so. Because at this point, I feel we need to bring our Q&A session to a close and to acknowledge and thank all of you who presented questions. I think we asked at least one of your questions. Some people presented more than one question. I hope everybody had an opportunity. So thank you very much for that. That really helped to liven the event and ensure that we have some insightful discussions. So yes, we're almost at the end of this webinar. For me as the moderator, I'd like to thank not only the organizers for having set this up and to provide the technical backstopping to make my life a little bit easier, but also in particular to acknowledge the presenters for their presentations and then their efforts to respond to the various questions put to them. At this stage, I'm going to sign off and hand over to Patricia Zimpito, who also gave our opening. She's now going to give the closing remarks on behalf of the government of Malawi. And perhaps as we go through this little closing ceremony, closing remarks, we can all put on our screens again so we can all see who we are and the audience can also see who we are. And then we will be pretty much ready to close. So Patricia, the floor is yours to give some closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Tony. And also let me say thank you to all the panelists and all the other participants to the meeting. As we come to the conclusion of the webinar, I would like to, as I've said, thank everyone. I think the experiences that have been shared are quite vast. It has been a very informative session. The presentations touched on a number of issues that are worth noting. For instance, the issue on the single window citizen engagement and the issues that come with it, like the cost sharing, the communication issues, whereby we are looking at GRM not only focusing on social protection programs, but other social grievances. Also highlighted was the importance of bringing together communities and service providers to solve problems. Additionally, we also ahead of the importance of ensuring that steps are taken to ensure that the vulnerable and poor are protected, and also to prevent harm to people and the environment in the process of our implementation of programs. And I think maybe as we are planning on moving towards a harmonized GRM, in our case in Malawi, probably one of the questions we need to ask ourselves is how do we ensure that we build confidence in the GRM mechanism? A number of issues, pertinent issues were raised during the plenary and the discussion that require consideration as we are moving forward. There have been issues to do with sensitization and communication. Are the people we are serving with these programs aware of the GRM activities and so on? How do we communicate to the masses? How about those maybe who don't have access to the helpline call centers? There have been also issues to do with challenges that come with integration. I think Nana talked quite a lot on that. The issues of integrating with different MISs. There were issues to do with how do we link GRM and community scorecards in assessing services, and the issues of interface of the call center and other management information services. I believe all of us, I think, have taken note on most of these issues. And I would like to say that the discussions have helped to provide a platform for us to revisit how we are implementing the GRMs and how to make them responsive to the needs of the beneficiaries. And from the discussion, it is clear that we need to design GRMs that are responsive. And in this case, there are a number of characteristics that we need to look into. For instance, issues to do with information. Do people, the beneficiaries, know that there is that facility they can use to lodge complaints? Have we sensitized the communities enough? We need to act quickly on issues. We need to do follow-up, resolve issues, and provide feedback, as well as ensure that beneficiaries are always in the loop. So I think from our side as government, we will critically review the issues that have been discussed and see how best we can take them on board in our GRM, even as we continue with the process of reviewing the Malawi National Social Support Program. I believe that this is just the beginning of our linkages and networking. I think we can still continue to engage with each other even after this webinar for further clarification, networking, and so on. Otherwise, on this note, I think having discussed this afternoon, I would like to thank all the panelists, Nana, Abid, Laurent, and Davis. Thank you for your insightful presentations. Let me also thank all the participants for the interest you have shown, for your contributions, as well as participation in this webinar. And let me thank you, Tony, as well, for moderating this webinar. Lastly, let me extend a special thank you to the organizers of the webinar and all those who worked behind the scenes to ensure that all arrangements for the webinar are in place. So thank you to Nina, GIZ team, Bessie, and all others maybe I may not remember to mention who have been part of this process. Otherwise, on this note, I would like to declare this meeting closed. Thank you so much.